Today we're in the Doncaster area right next to the boating lake in Asken, and we're going on an alternative route through a marsh which is just above sea level. Our mode of transport today is the new Citroen Dispatch. Heavens Halshaw in Rotherham have kindly let us have this van for a weekend test drive. So we decided to take it for a run around the narrow lanes between Asken and Rawcliffe just north of Doncaster. We've just left Asken on Moss Road and we're approaching the East Coast Main Line level crossing before driving through the village of Moss. You should shortly see the van starts rocking from side to side at different times throughout this journey, and that's because this marsh is doing what marshes do. You may remember that the Dutch were invited to conquer England in 1066, when a guy called William was crowned King of England, and poor old King Harold copped for one in the eye on the beach at Hastings. The Dutch soon set about draining the swamps because with an influx of their people there were more mouths to feed, and the Dutch were dab hands at reclaiming land from the sea, and quite a bit better than King Canute at turning back the waves. They also knew that rivers washed away nutrients from the hilly areas and deposited them in the swamps and marshlands around here, and by digging dikes and canals into the marsh they could drain it, and the result would be deep rich soil on which they could grow anything they wanted, and that's exactly what they did. Much later came the coal mines, and with them miners from all over the country, and the Dutch eventually became a minority, and by the millennium we didn't know what the dikes and the ditches were for anymore, and they got filled up with debris, and then we had the floods and the ground became waterlogged. So it isn't surprising that parts of this lane are sinking. So that's why I'm test driving this van on these roads, to see how easy it is to keep it under control and on the road without throwing me off, and to find how fatiguing driving it could be. This route has many bends and corners, and the one thing I noticed is the van has a tendency to understeer, which means you have to put in more effort to keep it tight into the bends, because I don't like cutting corners and neither do I like running off the road. And it's not just the steering but the whole ensemble of clutch, gears, brakes and stuff that gets in the way. The high seating position is what draws me towards vans and van-like vehicles. To be able to see over hedges helps in making decisions about the things like speed adjustment. But this geezer must have been going hell for leather. How early did you see him? The C5 Aircross following behind him is the type of vehicle we usually drive when filming these videos. It's an automatic, so it changes gear for you. So after 5 months I'm back to a stick change, and the Dispatcher's gear stick is nicely positioned right next to the steering wheel, so you're not searching about for it on the floor. One thing I was aware of was either I've got one arm longer than the other, or the steering wheel is set at an angle. I'm sure I'll get used to it, but it did lead to some fatigue of my right shoulder. As you can see, there are some deep ditches either side of the road, and the last thing you want is to slide off into one, which is exactly what I did several years ago on a very icy lane, so it's something I'm acutely aware of. You may be able to see the temperature on the top left of the infotainment screen. It says 3 degrees, which is about 37 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's close to freezing. So it's best to take the corners slow just in case there's still ice around, or you could end up in a ditch. Would I travel this route in the dark? I don't think I'd risk it. The road has improved considerably since we left Moss, and that's because of drainage. If you remember, you'll have seen all the new houses and drives, and if there were any ditches, they've been filled in, and that may be why the road was sinking, because there's nowhere for the water to go. The road here, however, shows little signs of breaking up. Fuel consumption on this Citroen Dispatch seems to be quite good. I didn't get the chance to see its miles per gallon readout. In fact, I couldn't find it, but it started out by indicating a range of 170 miles, and after the 90 or so miles we did over 2 days, it was indicating we still had 130 miles of range left. So we'd used up just 40 miles of range over a distance of 90 miles. But then again, it's a diesel, and we're not thrashing it, and there aren't any hills around here, except for the bridges over railway lines and the canals. I was going to show you the entire route we're taking today. Our journey actually started at Red House just north of Doncaster, and it will end at a place called Gilberdyke on the old Hull Road. But it would seem that YouTube doesn't like me using up its storage, especially since I improved the resolution by going up to 4K. And anyway, most viewers only watch the first 2 minutes and soon get fed up. And so I have to ask the question, why do they even bother clicking on them in the first place, when the thumbnail and the title clearly shows it's a road journey, and it should be plainly obvious that it's going to take more than 2 minutes. So, as you're still watching, I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking you, and I'd be really grateful if you'd tell me what kept you watching for so long in the comments below. And if you haven't done it already, please can you give this video a like, and why not subscribe, as it will help this channel be seen by more people like you. Sykehouse is a village in the middle of nowhere, with most of its population living either side of the 1 mile long village street. It has an arena where horse riders take part in equestrian competitions, which is on the right, round the next bend, after the speed readout thing on the pole. The parish of Sykehouse includes other small hamlets in the surrounding area, and is now known as Sykehouse 2000. I was unable to dig up any history about it, and that being so, we may as well relax to some music until we get to the next point of interest in about 2 minutes' time. We're now coming up to a drawbridge where the road crosses the new junction canal, which flows into the Ayr and Calder navigation, which we'll be crossing later. The canal is used by narrowboats, and to let them get under, the drawbridge is lifted and the traffic waits and waits and waits. We're now entering the wettest part of the countryside, on the appropriately named Marsh Hill Lane, but I can't see any hills. With the junction canal behind us, the River Went is somewhere over to our left. The River Don is just over a mile in front of us. The lane follows the Sykehouse main drain until we get to this double bend at Pinchin Green, and I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly. By now I'm settled in with the Citroen Dispatch steering, and I've got used to its understeer. And now we're exactly 1 mile from the River Don. It's a straight piece of road at the national speed limit, which for vans is 50 miles per hour. Not a lot of people know that, especially it seems van drivers. On a single carriageway in England, vans are limited to the same speed as HGVs, which is 50. However, you'll see plenty of vans doing 60, but it's in the highway code under Rule 124. And that just goes to show how many people bother to read the highway code. And just in case you're interested, the speed limit for vans on dual carriageways is 60 and not 70 like it is for cars. Unless, that is, the dual carriageway is a motorway when a van can travel at up to 70 miles per hour. This section of lane is similar to where we started, with parts of it sinking again, and a good test of the Citroen Dispatcher's straight line stability. We're about 300 yards from the River Don, where the road takes an interesting turn to the left, because it also has a change of level. It's a good test for the Citroen Dispatcher's handling, as well as good test for driver anticipation. As we rounded the bend, we saw a sparrowhawk hovering in the sky, which you might just be able to make out. From here, the road bends towards the River Don and then follows it a while, and I'm not sure whether the river level is higher than the fields to our left. What do you think? Although the riverbanks were built up by the Dutch to protect the fields from flooding, the ironwork is a much later addition. It's January and the fields are already growing some sort of crops or vegetables, but in some places they're waterlogged, as they usually are at this time of year. The road here dips down to almost the same level as the surrounding fields, and we're on a single track road with very few passing places. I'm pointing out the fields that are still underwater, and will be for the remainder of the winter, as it's mostly rain that falls here and not snow. But the meltwaters from the hills will be flowing into the rivers, which could overtop and bring flooding at these low levels, which are only a few feet above sea level. The high seating position in the Citroen Dispatch makes it easy to pick out the path of this lane. It's not as easy at car seating level. Good handling and responsiveness is essential for any vehicle driving on these roads, as is responsive brakes. Grabby brakes, which are now commonplace, may be okay for towns and major roads, but not here. We're now crossing the Ayr and Calder navigation canal, and there's no houseboats around at this time of year. This last stretch of the lane is often used by HGVs, which seem to operate from this farm on the right. And around harvest time, you'll see HGVs stacked up with hay bales, often with trailers as well. I've come across plenty of them, and the drivers are usually quite courteous, but it's a two-way game, and you have to be alert and ready to take to the nearest passing place. To say the lane is used by such heavy vehicles, the road surface is doing really well. I'm used to driving here, and I prefer this route to the main roads and motorways. Surprisingly, by taking it easy along these country lanes, we can get to our destination in about the same time as if we'd taken any of the main roads. The Citroen Dispatch is handling well even where the road dips, and as you can see, it does on these corners. I'm now watching out for oncoming traffic joining this route from the A614, which is just ahead, and I've spotted a couple of cars waiting for the Range Rover ahead of me to get through, and I'm not sure they'll set off, so I'm looking for a passing place to pull over. The learner driver opted to hold back, so I'm clear to go. We'll soon be joining the A614, which will take us into Rawcliffe and our destination beyond, but this video will end at Rawcliffe, so if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It's free to do so, and there's no catch. And as for the new Citroen Dispatch, this is the Enterprise Edition, with the 1.5 litre blue HDI Peugeot engine and 6-speed manual gearbox, and although it costs the same as a standard version of the Citroen C5 Aircross SUV, it isn't as well equipped. It doesn't have a sat-nav or a reversing camera. Those things are extras, which bumps up the price. But then again, a C5 Aircross doesn't have 5.3 cubic metres of load space, and although it has a class-leading 0.58 cubic metres of boot space, enough for the weekly supermarket run, unless you put the rear seats down, it has nowhere else to put stuff. So if you need the extra space for all your gear, and perhaps a wheelchair, and perhaps a camping toilet for when you're in the middle of nowhere on a country lane, the new Citroen Dispatch provides that space. And if you're a couple of old fossils like us, you only need the two front seats. But the new Citroen Dispatch has a wide bench seat, so 3 people can travel up front. And if you want to take a GoPro along to video your outings, there are more places to mount one, and without as much aggro. So will we be buying one? Most likely. So continue to watch our videos to see how we put a camping toilet into a Citroen Dispatch van.